Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Funke. Funke, first of all, before we get into it, we're going to talk about leadership and we're going to talk about the current situation within Covid-19 and what we can be doing as leaders.
Yes.
But before we get into that, Funke, tell me where people can get hold of you.
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as Dr. Funke Abimbola MBE, which should be very easy to find. I think I'm the only one with that name on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter as Champ1 Diversity, and I've also got a website, funkeabimbola.com, and you can contact me through there. There's lots of information about me on the website.
And you're pretty active on social and stuff.
I am very active. Yes.
So before we talk about leadership in the current market, I'm really intrigued about your journey. I think it's the first time I've done 107 of these interviews, and this is the first time I've had somebody with an MBE.
Oh my goodness!
I have asked the Queen to come on, but she told me that.
Too busy.
Yes, she had a birthday and stuff.
Of course.
But you've got a great background in different things. You're a great champion for diversity and inclusion, which is so important, even in the current situation. But give people a sense of your background. One of the reasons why I'm asking it is because my co-founder, Adam Gray, his daughter she's 19 in August. And what she said to him one day recently was, Daddy, can you tell me people who are out there in society that I should be looking up to and be the type of person I want to and I could be. And it's easy for me because I wanted to be like there's footballers and idiots like that Bobby Moore and people like that I wanted to be. But if I'm a young female, there needs to be people that can inspire me to make sure that I go on and I do well as well.
Yeah, so my background is interesting, as you say. I'm Nigerian born. I was born in Nigeria, moved to the UK for education purposes. I do come from a privileged upper middle class Nigerian background. It's very, very important for me to state that. I was privately educated here, and something I took for granted at the time, of course, because you never appreciate your own privilege. But I'm very grateful for the sacrifices my parents made in educating me and my younger siblings over here privately. I had every possible advantage. I was supposed to become a doctor. That was a family tradition. I'm the only family member who didn't become a doctor. So younger siblings, both parents, aunts, uncles, etc., all in medicine. I chose law, and my dad was a little rattled by that initially. He knew nothing about law, but thankfully he was very, very supportive. Of course, he was paying the fees, so I did need his support, and he was hugely, hugely supportive. I suppose what for me were the markers that really shaped my leadership very early on was when I realized that it wasn't a level playing field. And this was a genuine shock to me when I'd graduated in law and was looking to then become a solicitor. The hurdles I faced could only be explained by racial bias,
Yes.
Cultural bias, unconscious bias. There are many examples which could be a whole separate, interview in itself. And eventually I did get my foot in the door, but I had to make over 150 phone calls to senior partners at law firms and to in-house lawyers to get the position I needed at entry level. And I really shouldn't have had to do that, given how hard I'd worked, the grades I had, the university I'd been to, top Russell Group law school. All of these things are very, very important when you're wanting to get into law in a way that they shouldn't be. Really, it should be about the person, their potential. And once I was in, things were fine. And then I faced various hurdles when I had my son returning back into the workspace. He's now 17, so we are going back quite a long time. But these markers really shaped my leadership because I had to become very resilient very early on. I had so many people surprised to see a Black female solicitor around the table. I'd chosen to become a corporate lawyer. The more senior I became, the fewer, people of color were there at all. And at all 4 law firms where I worked, I was the only Black solicitor, which I only realized after I'd left the firms, bizarrely at the time. I just took it on the chin. About 10 years ago, I moved into industry. I moved into the pharmaceutical sector. So you can see how medicine really was still
Yeah.
very much a part of my life. And I still do work in the healthcare sector now. And I moved into business leadership roles, leveraging my legal background. And I work for the world's largest biotech company. Most recently, I've been working for a smaller global pharmaceutical company. And at this moment in time, I'm studying, I'm doing a mini MBA with Wharton Business School. I'm running a small consultancy advising board members on the side to try and embed my MBA learning, because I need a combination of both to really learn and grasp these concepts, with a view to then going back into full-time employment later on this year. So that's a sort of potted history of where I'm at currently.
Okay, and you have an MBE, so
I do have an MBE. Yeah.
so how did you get your MBE? Because I think that's important. You know, it's important to be recognised like that. People outside of the UK, this is something that the Queen basically gives.
Yes.
In recognition for people in society who are doing good things. So you know, and you've been doing good things, so it's good to get the recognition.
Yes, so I was awarded an MBE for services to diversity in the legal profession and to young people almost 3 years ago now. It was June 2017. And I had no idea that I'd been nominated. There's a lot of secrecy around the process. But only after I'd been successful did I then find out who was actually involved and just how many people had put me forward. And it was a wide range of individuals and organizations that I'd worked with over the years in many ways to improve outcomes for young people. Focusing then, as I was, on the legal profession, I'm focusing more on the healthcare sector now, which I'm very happy to talk about also. But that's what I was awarded it for. It was an incredible surprise. I still, when people say it, you remind me almost that I received one now. I find it quite astounding. But it was wonderful. I met Prince Charles. He gave me
Well,
my...
I've met him as well. He's wonderful.
Yes, wonderful. And then he invited me to a reception a few months later where I met him and the Duchess of Cornwall. And it's just been an incredible journey, wonderful recognition, for which I'm very grateful.
He's actually, I've met him once at an opening, and he's such a lovely person.
He is.
I mean, it's kind of his job to be a lovely person, but you know, the first thing he did, he came into the building and he started talking to what I would call ordinary people, and he just went up to them. Obviously, there was somebody there with a police protection. He just went. He said, "So what do you do?" And he was just like, "Oh, he's so lovely." And I always thought he's a great person ever since. Anyway.
Oh, he's wonderful. Great sense of humor as well.
Yeah.
Had a lovely chat.
He was telling jokes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Everyone walked out of the building. Everyone, isn't he a wonderful person?
He is.
Yeah. So leadership. We're in the middle of this terrible situation we have with COVID-19. I know before we came on, we were talking about how watching the news, and in fact, both of us actually restricted watching the news because it can be so terrifying. I have two parents who are very vulnerable. I may never see them again, and so for me, it's terrified. But you know, from a leadership perspective, what qualities? Because I think that a lot of us are followers. And what we need to now do is lead, and that's quite different. And what are you seeing at the moment from a leadership perspective out there?
So I'm seeing a variety of leadership styles coming through, and not all of which are hitting the right mark. And you know, I'm a firm believer anyway in servant leadership, whatever the situation. And for me, that means putting people first, community first. Ahead of profits, you know, your other, you know, markers for value or ways that you're accessing value with that organization. And it's quite interesting to see where there is servant leadership coming through. It's with those organizations where the CEO is taking a significant pay cut, for example, over redundancies with staff, where, you know, I've heard examples of some CEOs and some senior leaders re-employing people so they can benefit from the furlough scheme for that period of time before then taking on a new role. So they've already resigned, and their new start date might have been, put back in some way. And some employers then re-employ, which, you don't do that unless you really, really care about the individual. We've seen some really bad examples as well of senior leaders who haven't put people or community first. So this period of crisis has really brought to the fore a wide variety of leadership styles. And those organizations that will win are those that are adopting a servant leadership style. I firmly believe that, whether you're not for profit or commercial.
And what's your definition of servant leadership? Because it's quite a lot of these things can sound quite trendy. And we still have to, we still have a situation where there's a lot of people are still we still have a lot of leaders who are male. We still have a lot of those male who believe there has to be a level of machoism. But it's not about that, is it? It's about looking after people. What's your definition of servant leadership?
It's putting people and community first. So when you do that, you think about others before yourself. You think about the individual. You're not seeing your staff or your colleagues as just monogamous mass that form part of an organization. You're very aware that behind every single person is a story, a family, friends, etc. They all have their concerns. You will typically have a very high emotional quotient. You'll be very, very attuned and self-aware to individuals. You genuinely want the best for them. I can think of many good examples. Jacinda Ardern's a good example. She's taken a significant pay cut in New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. She's taken a huge pay cut, as have her ministers. We've got several examples with British Telecom, here in the UK, and other companies that, again, that kind of sacrifice means that, my goodness, you're really putting your money where your mouth is for the staff, for your colleagues, for the people that work alongside you. And there's a real sense of humility that you can pick up on when you see good servant leadership. The language that servant leaders use is all about others. So they'll forever be talking about benefiting either the community or their staff over anything else. That is the type of thing that I would define as servant leadership.
And I think in this world, we're not going to go back to where we were before.
No.
People are becoming too used to working from home. The infrastructure will be in place. And while there may be some people having small offices, there won't be the level of office or the number of people that are going into offices.
Yes.
And that means, as leaders, we will have a remote or a workforce that's going to be working from home, and that's going to be very different, isn't it?
It will be. And in fact, I was talking to someone just yesterday, very senior colleague within the legal profession, who was saying just that. And of course, office space is very expensive. Let's not forget that actually renting the space is a huge overhead for a lot of organizations. So there's an economic argument that actually when these leases are up for renewal, having been through this process, would those firms actually want then to renew on the same terms for the same amount of space going forward? I've heard from a lot of employees that now they're working from home, they're not going to go back to full-time commuting. They're wanting 3 days a week from home going forward. It's going to be very difficult for companies and firms to say no to that. But it's a different leadership style, again, that's needed when you're relying on technology, making people feel included, when you haven't got touch and, some of the non-verbal cues that you can pick up on much, much easier face-to-face don't exist in the same way when you've got a Zoom video call, whatever. So again, I think some learning needs to be embedded there to make it a success going forward.
And I think we're all learning. I've worked from home for 20 years, and I've worked for organizations where they've actually driven you to use technology, but not as much as this.
Yes.
There's always been a face-to-face meeting. There's always been, well, can you come into London and we'll get together? There's always been that, but you just and it's really forcing us to change.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing that with, there isn't the ability to say, right, we're going to get in the office in London or wherever, and we're going to stand up. Someone's going to stand up on the stage and they're going to talk to you. That if they're going to address the workforce, it will be over Zoom. And again, that has a different feel to it.
It really does. It
Yeah.
does. And for me, I mean, I've worked with a very large global company, the largest biotech, where technology was maximized even then. You know, we physically didn't have enough desks in the building for everyone to come in
Yeah.
on any given day anyway. So we had to have some flexibility. And so again, the communications teams and that was built into management training, was how do you get the most out of your team remotely, engaging, and that's something that we really need to fine tune going forwards. But this has revolutionized the healthcare sector. This whole period has forced disruption with tech in a way that the NHS has been very, very resistant, for example, to GPs having video clinics as a matter
Yes.
of course, or indeed any doctor. And now that's been forced, that and it's worked. People aren't misdiagnosing. I mean, it's working process, and it's going to be very difficult again with all the family members who work as doctors in the NHS saying, now we're doing it, we're not going to go back. And it's a good thing. It's a very, very positive thing.
Yeah, it's interesting how people can say, I could never understand why I had to go into the doctors, and I always thought, well, the best place I'm going to pick up some disease will be at the doctors.
Absolutely.
Sneeze on me, and have to traipse all the way in here just to be told, go away and get some sleep, and it will go away. And why can't I do that from the comfort of my own home? And now I can.
Oh, it works very, very well. And in fact, I mentioned earlier that I'm focusing more on medical students in terms of maximizing potential for the young people, medical schools. And it's now the 5th year that I've been running a medical scholarship, which I founded in memory of my father, who passed away 8 years ago, very sadly. But every single medical student that I interview as part of this scheme talks about tech. They all talk about the use of data and technology to transform healthcare without exception. So, I feel very hopeful about the pipeline, if truth be told, because they're so aware that that's the way forward to truly innovate and drive positive outcomes really for all patients. It's crucial.
When we did the prep on this, you talked about Timpsons, and
Yeah,
Timpsons is a classic example for people that don't know. They're a business that cut keys,
they are.
and they're always in the opening of a mall. If you go into a mall, you're always find a Timpsons. You can get your keys cut, and you can get a new sole put on your pair of shoes, They've always done things for the unemployed and stuff, haven't they? But
they have. I mean, James Timpson, who's the current CEO, he does a lot of work with re-employing those who've been in prison. He's
yes,
very well known for that. He's very active on Twitter, and he just talks constantly about his employees. They lost an employee recently to COVID-19. And that's something he talks about, the Timpson family being everybody who works within the company. And he was posting about the sad, tragic loss, which was very, very much appreciated by the family of the individual who died, of course. So, he's a very good example, and thank you for bringing that up, of where he's wanting to preserve the staff pool at the moment. He's going to great lengths to make sure that there are no redundancies and that he can just see the company through this period. And of course, he has huge loyalty because of
yes,
that.
yeah,
And that's another point that we need to bear in mind, is that the companies that haven't behaved as well as they should have during this period, whilst they may be able to attract staff going forward, the retention rates are going to be pretty poor, I would imagine, because people don't remember, don't forget, do they, how they've been treated?
no, and I think that with the Timpson thing is that he employs people that have been in prison, and he's always been very open, saying, well, if people come to me and they work and they know what they should be doing, if anything happens that untoward, then they know what will happen then as well. But you have a whole bunch of employees that are very loyal to.
Yes.
I mean, the person in my Timpsons, he's been there for years.
I know.
And they get and one of the things that we need, one of the things I need as a leader is you want your employees to feel that they're going to stay. And one of the things that's going to happen, I think, as we come out of this, is that people are obviously going to stay because they're concerned they're going to lose their job. But always, what happens when you come out of a recession is that people then start looking around, going, "Well, I only work there because it was paying my mortgage. Now I'm going to go somewhere else," and immediately you lose all your staff.
That does happen. That's a typical cycle, as you say. So, doing the right thing now is really important. It's crucial.
And I think one of the things it's highlighted as well, I don't really want to go into the political details of that, but I mean, if you think about Richard Branson's in a situation where, he's not paid any tax for 14 years, but people are making decisions of, I know a good friend of mine, his daughter's one of the cabin crew, and she shouldn't go without any money if she's furloughed just because her boss is Richard Branson. But maybe Richard Branson and maybe some other people will actually go, do you know, I need to change my attitude here?
Yes, it's a shame about what's happening with Richard Branson, because Virgin Unite, which is the foundation that he funds, completely out of the profits, and personally quite often funds, has done incredible work to help startups and young businesses and, around diverse startups, incredible work. But of course, that's all being forgotten now or not really celebrated in the middle of all the news. So the narrative has been completely skewed because of what's happening currently.
So what is it that I need to do as a leader to be more of a servant leader then? What's your advice?
My advice is to always think about others before yourself. It really, it's having that selfless, obviously in a balanced way, because if you go to extremes, that's not healthy either. But it's always being selfless in how you're leading and thinking, how is this going to impact other people? Before I think about myself, that actually should be the driver, is that you're actually bringing positivity, positive impact to others. And then you derive a lot of pleasure out of seeing that. You get your sense of that you've done a good thing from how you're impacting other people in the community. And that's what servant leaders, or budding servant leaders should really be thinking about at the current time and going forwards.
So a great example is you put a post recently on LinkedIn. You just skated past it, even though it was really important, which was the fact that there was a number of people that you've been involved with, young people, and you said, "Here, these young people," and I can't remember quite what it was, but you celebrated it on LinkedIn. And again, it's about passing on the baton. It's about, we have a duty in the position that we have to make sure that young people from all different backgrounds, who may or may not have the same privilege that we have, but they have the same ability to get on with their life, and they're given a chance to get on with their life.
Yes, I mean, that's a good example actually of how I sort of demonstrate servant leadership, is celebrating others. I very rarely post on LinkedIn about myself, actually. I don't think I've said anything about myself for several months now. And I'm focusing on others, good leaders generally, but specifically now the pipeline of medical students that have already won a scholarship through this scheme that I run. And yes, it's very uplifting for them. They're all still in medical school, having to do exams, and a few of them are now doctors, which again has been huge cause of celebration, the end of a 5 or 6 year journey in medical school. But that's so uplifting for so many other people beyond the individual who's being celebrated. And it has a wonderful ripple effect, Tim, on others who then see that and think, I can do it. They often come from underprivileged backgrounds, have had obstacles to overcome. And that lifts me up. I feel great starting my day off with a post about a talented medical student who's doing great things.
And that's for me. That's kind of one of the examples of what we can do as leaders is to be making sure, as you say, it's not about us, it's about other people, and we think about that first.
Absolutely. Championing others, giving them the visibility and highlighting for others what they are doing. People feel very funny and embarrassed to highlight the work they're doing. But actually, if someone else is doing it for you, it's a wonderful thing to be doing, for someone else. And it leads to more opportunity for those people you're highlighting. I've had so many wonderful stories of opportunities that have come because I've been highlighting this wonderful leadership. People have learned from it. It's been really, really positive. And for me at this time, when we're all battling with lockdown and COVID-19, it's a really uplifting way to try and get positive, inspirational stories out there in the middle of a lot of negativity at the moment.
And I know that I've got two people off at the moment who, because they've got children at home and they've got a homeschool. One's child is very autistic and needs 24-hour care. The other son has Asperger's. But there are people like yourself who are going to spend this time investing in themselves. And I think it's one of the times as leaders to start saying to people, why don't you do some training? Even if you're furloughed, the government rules on furlough allows you to do training. And, here is a time when you've got we've got some time on the hands, because, it's like you're doing a mini MBA, but you've probably been saying for years, saying, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that.
I know.
But for some of us, not all of us, we are being given the gift of time.
Yes.
For others, my partner has two boys, 25 and 28, and she's saying to the people that are homeschooling their kids, you will never get this time again. You need to enjoy this, because you may hate it, or you need to enjoy it. But this is a time also for looking at ourselves and training ourselves.
It is, and there's so much content available now, of course. There's probably a lot more content through LinkedIn, for example, than there ever has been, because everyone's at home. There's real focus on using LinkedIn to network. There are no end of webinars and things you can attend for free and learn from. And I'd really encourage anyone, even if it's only half an hour 3 times a week or whatever time you can spare. It's just wonderful to attend some of these online panel sessions. All the events that would happen face to face are now happening online, and many of them are free to attend. So do use this time if you find you have a bit of time to invest in yourself. Make sure you come out of this period being a better leader than going into it. That's certainly my aim, that I learn and grow during this time. And
I'm attending far more seminars that hours, which normally I'd say, I don't have time for that. But now I'm actually attending far more of them, and I think it's becoming, for me, I'm one of these people that every day's a school day, and I know that I'll go onto something and I'll learn one thing, which makes me a better person.
And practice that one thing, because you'll pick up lots of tips from the one event. But if you practice just one thing week on week, it becomes a habit and then forms part of your leadership style.
So to finish off, is there anything that you think that from a leadership perspective that if there's one thing that you recommend, is what would that be?
To use this time to reflect, I think, to really reflect on what your personal values are and how you want to be able to use those values to leverage into what you do on a day-to-day basis for a living. I think we're all motivated by our personal values, and it's always good to work somewhere which actually aligns with those personal values. So it's a great time for reflection. I think everyone should really harness that.
And to come out of this period as better people. I mean, from a leadership perspective, here's our chance to actually sit down and go, if we're not practicing servant leadership, maybe it's time to slow down and think about, maybe that's what I'm going to do from now on.
Absolutely. And look at the great examples, that are very, heavily publicized at the moment, where there is real demonstration of servant leadership, and think, how can I apply that to what I do and what I'm like as a leader going forward?
Fantastic. Funke, it's been really great talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Very, very insightful. Best of luck with your mini MBA.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure you're going to knock it out the park anyway. And I'll see you online soon.
Yes, thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Funke.
Thank you. Take care.